There is a price for waking up, and almost no one tells you the currency you'll have to use. It begins subtly. You find you no longer belong, not out of defiance or damage, but because something fundamental within you has shifted. Your reactions change. Social rituals start to feel like a script you never agreed to memorize. Conversations you once navigated now feel like they siphon your energy directly. You try to name it, but it's not depression, not worry, not arrogance. It's the quiet, irreversible realization that you're seeing the scaffolding behind the stage set, and you can't look away. From that point, a quiet rupture occurs. Feigning engagement becomes a physical impossibility. You stop blaming others for the unrest you carry inside. Rules that only function in silence begin to feel absurd. And then, the world notices your absence. Not because you did anything, but because you stopped acting. You stopped contorting yourself to match the unspoken expectations, and that void is louder than any protest. The psychologist Carl Jung spent his life mapping this terrain. He didn't call it peaceful enlightenment. He called it a perilous journey. He saw that genuine awakening isn't a sudden flash of light, but a slow unwinding that leaves behind clear, measurable signs in how a person exists in the world. The first signal emerges before you have words for the change. Jung documented this through his work. Picture someone successful, charming, by all accounts perfectly adapted. Yet in a room, they reveal a startling trait. A complete indifference to how they are perceived, not from pride or spite, but from a simple lack of necessity. The need for approval has vanished from their inner world. They speak plainly without sculpting their words for effect. Jung identified this as the early crumbling of the persona, the social mask we wear to belong, to avoid conflict, to be loved. For most, this mask eventually fuses with their identity. But here, it becomes a costume. The individual can still play the part when needed, but they are no longer merged with the role. Jung described it as being both an actor on stage and an audience member watching the play. You know it's a performance, and that knowledge alters everything. This is why such people often make others uneasy. Their presence acts as a silent mirror. People sense, without knowing why, that their own mask is being seen through. The common response isn't intrigue, but defense. They are called aloof, detached, or arrogant. Yet there is no malice in their gaze, only a stark contrast. As the persona loses its power, dependence on external validation dissolves. Praise doesn't inflate, criticism doesn't devastate. This neutrality is unsettling within groups, because our social systems run on status, comparison, and the pressure to conform. A person who doesn't respond to these levers becomes ungovernable. They can't be moved by shame, guilt, or social pressure, not because they resist, but because the hooks have nothing to catch on to. They move through hierarchies, untouched by power plays. They don't crave attention, nor do they fear obscurity. This isn't disdain, it's psychological liberty. And this is merely the first sign, the point of no return. Once you see behind the curtain, you can't pretend the play is real. The second sign is more psychologically profound. The person has faced and integrated their shadow. This isn't a metaphor. It means they hold, without illusion, the knowing that they contain the same potential for darkness they see in others. This awareness isn't born of shame. It's a radical self-honesty that erases any fantasy of moral purity. Jung noted these individuals can discuss their own capacity for cruelty or manipulation with the calm of someone describing the rain. Not because they approve, but because they've ceased fleeing from that part of themselves. They've looked at every repressed urge, every selfish possibility, and acknowledged, this too is within me. The result is an inner stillness that many find threatening. Human wickedness doesn't shock them because they recognize it as an internal possibility, not a foreign monster. Consequently, they are immune to narratives of absolute righteousness or us versus them purity. To others, they can seem almost alien. When someone confesses a shameful act, the conscious person doesn't offer judgment or cheap forgiveness. They offer recognition. They don't need to condemn because they know the same terrain within. This is why people confess their deepest shadows to them. Here's the crucial distinction. Integrating the shadow doesn't make you wicked, it makes you aware. A person who knows their darkness can choose their actions rather than being puppeteered by hidden impulses. Jung concluded the truly dangerous individuals aren't those who know their shadow, but those who believe they have none, those who can commit horrors convinced of their own virtue. The third sign is paradoxical, a retreat from social life. Not from melancholy or apathy, but because the cacophony of the unconscious world becomes exhausting. The unspoken pacts, the hidden agendas, the collective fictions, navigating them demands a relentless vigilance. Here, solitude isn't escape, it's recuperation. This withdrawal worries others. Family sees illness, friends see pathological isolation. But the conscious person isn't retreating from connection, they're retreating from performance. They've quit the collective theater of unconsciousness. This creates profound loneliness, as so much human bonding is glued by shared, unexamined agreements. Instead of wide circles, they cultivate a few deep bonds. One authentic conversation outweighs 100 hollow ones. This isn't contempt, it's integrity. It's the moment they stop pretending that unconscious relationships are nourishing. They choose genuine solitude over counterfeit company. And here, the process starts to feel truly hazardous. The fourth sign Jung documented is the end of projection. The person stops blaming others for their internal weather. When someone triggers discomfort, the question shifts from, "Why did you do this to me?" to, "What does this reveal about me?" This makes them nearly impossible to manipulate through guilt or victimhood. Most people live projecting their inner turmoil outward, blaming parents, partners, circumstances. The conscious person breaks this loop. When pain arises, they ask what within them needs transformation.
Let's be clear. Losing projection doesn't mean tolerating abuse. It means responding with awareness, not reacting from wounding. This shift disrupts relationships. When someone tries to make them responsible for another's emotions, they don't accept the burden. They don't argue. They gently return the projection with clarity, forcing the other to face their own emotional agency. This is often called coldness, but what's gone is not empathy, it's the unconscious contract of shared dysfunction. Imagine blaming someone anchored in their own reality. You say, "You upset me." They respond, "What part of you felt unsettled?" You try to provoke chaos and meet unwavering calm. For someone who needs to project, this is maddening. The conscious person becomes a mirror, reflecting everything back to its source. The fifth sign may be the most socially devastating, the pathologizing gaze of the environment. From Jung's view, this happens because the individual no longer fits into consensus reality. They question assumptions everyone else accepts. They see through the social constructions people need for safety. To those still identified with the collective unconscious, this looks not like insight, but like deviation, and deviation is often diagnosed as illness. Normality is not truth, it's agreement. When you stop fully participating in the shared story, you become strange, threatening. The collective instinct is to label what it can't assimilate as sick. This puts the awakening person in a brutal bind, speak their truth and risk marginalization, or hide their awareness and live inauthentically. Many learn a middle path, becoming bilingual. They speak the language of the unconscious world when necessary, preserving their lucidity in private. This isn't deceit, it's conscious adaptation. They can navigate the office, the family gathering, but the cost is a life of constant translation, a deep sense of being present but never fully met. The sixth sign is emotional sovereignty. At this stage, the person can no longer be emotionally manipulated or gaslit into doubting their own perception. When someone tries to rewrite their reality, they don't engage in the debate. They observe the attempt without losing their center. This is terrifying for those who rely on control, because their old tools shatter. This autonomy springs from shadow work. Having faced their own capacity for distortion, they instantly recognize it in others. Manipulation finds no foothold. Guilt has no stickiness. This isn't coldness, it's compassion with boundaries. They can feel deep empathy without absorbing another's suffering. In close relationships, this feels like betrayal to those used to wielding guilt or chaos. How dare you not play the game? Emotional autonomy severs bonds based on control, which is why it is so disruptive. The seventh and final sign is what Jung called the return. After the withdrawal, the shadow work, the person re-engages with the world. But they don't return to fit in. They return to participate from consciousness. They can work, relate, fulfill roles, but they do so from a place of observation, not identification. Jung saw this as the most delicate phase. The individual is now integrated, sees patterns clearly, and recognizes manipulative dynamics early. This carries risk. A conscious person without ethics is destructive, but a conscious person guided by ethics becomes a true carrier of culture. The central tension is this: the conscious individual is no longer governable by normal means. Social pressure fails. Shame is irrelevant. Status is meaningless. Systems built on unconscious compliance sense a threat. As a reflex, these individuals often become scapegoats, blamed for conflicts they merely revealed. This is not personal, it's a defensive immune response. A conscious person in a family exposes denied pain. In a workplace, they reveal collective fiction. This is why Jung called this knowledge dangerous. It doesn't attack the system, it simply exposes it. If you see these 7 signs in yourself, the mask crumbling, the shadow embraced, the necessary solitude, the end of blame, the label of strangeness, emotional sovereignty, and the conscious return, you can no longer pretend. These aren't spiritual badges, they are the inevitable consequences of becoming aware in a sleeping world. Jung named this process individuation, a dangerous transformation. Dangerous not to you, but to any structure that depends on unconsciousness. Those who walk this path are often misunderstood, labeled, or excluded, not because they are wrong, but because they stop upholding the unspoken agreements that hold the group together. Awakening doesn't bring comfort, it brings lucidity, and lucidity demands a price. You can no longer project, you can no longer perform, you can no longer obey what you know isn't real. Consciousness doesn't spread in waves, it advances one person at a time. Each person who integrates their shadow shrinks the collective darkness. Each person who stops acting unconsciously expands the realm of what's truly possible. That is why this knowledge is perilous, and that is precisely why it is essential. Your sole responsibility is to remain awake, even if the world asks you to sleep. This channel, Winds of Thought, exists to voice what the collective unconscious would rather keep silent. If you're willing to explore this territory further, subscribe, not for entertainment, but to sustain a thread of awareness when everything invites you to close your eyes. If you found value in this, please like this video. It helps this signal reach others. And activate the bell if you're ready to be unsettled once more.